Alright, so today's tutorial is for this really cute laying down axolotl, and I just recently figured out how to make this body shape, and I'm so excited to make different characters with this body. Alright, so all of the things that you're going to need to create this are in the video description, so make sure you check that out, and let's get ready to go. Alright, so I'm getting started on the axolotl's body, and I'm going to be using this light pink yarn because I think it looks really nice with my contrasting color, which is sort of this darker color. Now you can use whatever colors you'd like, but I recommend a lighter color for the body and then a darker color for the frills. Alright, so we're going to begin by making the first leg, and we're going to start with a magic loop. So I like to tie mine by forming sort of like a finger guns here with my left hand, or my not hook hand. And then I take a little bit of the tail, maybe 5 inches or so, and then I pinch it with my thumb against the bottom 2 digits of my index and middle finger. And then I like to wrap it around my fingers to form the loops. So I'm going to take the working yarn, so this is attached to my ball. I'm going to wrap around the back side of my index and my middle finger around that top digit on the other side. So if I flip my hand over, you can see. And then I'll take that working yarn, I'll keep wrapping it by crossing it over what's behind my thumb. And I like to pinch that there too. And I'm going to wrap one more time around these 2 fingers, but this time around the lower digit. So if I flip my hand over, you can see I've got one on the top digit, one on the lower digit. And then one last time I'm going to go behind my thumb. I'm going to use it to hold all 3 of those strands in place. Once you've got all those wraps, you can take your crochet hook, flip your hand over, and then we're going to go underneath the top loop and use the hook to grab the bottom loop, and then pull the bottom loop underneath the top loop. Once you've done that, I like to flip my hands back over, so I'm flipping them away from my body. And then I like to bring my hook and my hands together so that I can use the index and thumb on my hook hand to grab those 2 loops that are still on my fingers. Then when I've done that, I can let go with my thumb and very gently slide all of those loops off of my fingers. Once you've done that, you've got 2 tails that you need to worry about. We want to make sure that our tail, which is the one that's not attached to the ball of yarn, is out of our way. So I like to kind of go in clockwise, just sort of toss it over behind. And then I can take my working yarn, which is the stuff that is still attached to the ball of yarn, and begin tensioning it. So I'm going to put that over the index finger on my left hand, or my not hook hand. And then we need to grab onto the tail and the magic loop. So if you look, you can see where my tensioning is, where I'm holding it. It's still kind of pinched in my right hand's thumb. I'm going to grab both the loop and the tail underneath where that yarn is tensioned. So I'm grabbing those both. It's kind of sandwiching my tensioned yarn. And then when I've got those pinched in my left hand, or my not hook hand, I can let go with my right hand, or my hook hand, and then I can tension this loop on my hook by pulling my index finger up. Once I've tensioned my yarn and I pulled my index finger, you can see my middle finger kind of flew up to kind of help me pull that yarn. We can lock our magic loop in place by taking our hook and yarning over and drawing our working yarn through that loop. Once you've done that, you can let go. You don't have to worry about anything coming untangled or coming undone because that loop locks everything in place. I also like to take the tail and pull it out of the loop here. It's not necessary, but it's just something that I find makes it a little easier to pull my magic loop. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're ready to go ahead and put our first single crochet stitch inside of our magic loop. So we're going to do that by working both underneath the tail and the loop of the magic loop. So I'm going to go underneath, and you may differ here as a crocheter. Some folks like to yarn under. I always learned to yarn over, so take this with a grain of salt. If you crochet by yarning under, do what you do normally. But I'm going to yarn over and draw up a loop. Then I'm going to yarn over and draw through both. I also like to tighten this first stitch by kind of sliding it over to the right. Once you've done that, you can also mark this stitch. Now that we've got our first stitch marked, we're going to go ahead and put 7 more single crochet stitches inside of our magic loop, so we have 8 total. Alright, I have all 8 single crochet stitches inside of my magic loop, so I'm going to do the magic loop part and pull my tail, which closes off our first round. Alright, and then for the next 4 rounds, all we need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around for 4 rounds total. So I'm going to go ahead and place my first stitch here in the stitch that we marked. And then I'll move my marker up. And then I'm going to continue putting 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around until I get to the end of my 4th round. So I will see you whenever I am done with that. Alright, so I just wrapped up my 4th round of single crochet here on this first leg. So to finish off, I'm going to slip stitch to the first stitch of that 4th round that we made. So just go under, pull through, and then pull through again. And now that I've slip stitched, I'm going to cut myself a short tail on this first leg. Then I'm going to pull that last slip stitch all the way through and then tighten it. I also like to take the magic loop tail and kind of stuff it inside of this first leg. I do it on the other leg too. Counts as free stuffing, and then I don't have to worry about weaving it in. Alright, so now that we've made our first leg, we need to make one more exactly the same way, except we're not going to fasten off by slip stitching and cutting. So go ahead and start yourself another leg by magic looping and then putting 8 single crochet and then working 4 rows of single crochet, and I'll meet you back here whenever I have that done as well. Alright, so you can see I've just finished the second leg. I went ahead and already tucked in the magic loop tail on the inside, and I haven't fastened off with a slip stitch because we're going to begin working these 2 legs together to join them so we don't have to sew them together later. So to join them, we're going to go ahead and chain 1 stitch. So I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to grab my first leg that I made, and we're going to be working in the stitch that our slip stitch is slipped in, because I like to work the tail in as I go. So I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to go from front to back through that stitch that our slip stitch is in, and then lay the tail that I cut from my first leg over my hook. Then I'll go ahead and take my working yarn. I'm going to yarn over, draw through, and then yarn over again to make my first single crochet stitch on this side. So right now we've got a chain 1 and then 1 single crochet on our first leg, and it's connecting our 2 legs together. I also like to mark that first single crochet that I've made. And then we're going to continue working in the 8 or the 7 remaining stitches on our first leg, and then working that tail in as we go too. So there's my first stitch. Here's my second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and my last single crochet on this first leg. Before we work on, let's go ahead and trim that tail that we've been weaving in. We don't need it anymore, it's woven in. And then this is where it's really important on this pattern especially to kind of count your stitches, because if you look, that looks suspiciously like a stitch that I need to put my hook through. However, it's not because we've already worked our 8 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and put a single crochet stitch in the back of the chain 1 that I made to connect the 2 legs together. And the reason I like to mark that first single crochet is because it looks a little bit like the chain 1 that we made to connect them. We also want to be sure that the chain 1 that we've made isn't rotated or twisted. So you can see I've just twisted it here. We want it to be exactly like it was whenever we formed it. So we'll go ahead and make a single crochet in the back side of the chain once we've checked it's not twisted. I'm just going to go through and then single crochet. Now that we've got that done, we need to make 8 single crochet around this other leg, then double check. This also looks suspiciously like a stitch that we need to go in, but if you look, that's where our chain is coming out of. So we're going to skip this one here and go on to the next and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we should have one last stitch to work because we need to work in the front of the chain that we made to connect the 2 legs. Alright, so those are the legs connected. It's probably the most difficult part of the pattern, so pat yourself on the back, congrats, you made it. Let's continue on by increasing. So we're going to go ahead and take our stitch marker out, and then we're going to start a repetition pattern of making 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches. So 1 single crochet stitch, let's remark that stitch too. 1 single crochet in the next, and then we're going to increase in that 3rd stitch. So an increase is when we just put 2 single crochet stitches in the same stitch. And then we're going to repeat that pattern of 2 single crochet, increase all the way around. Though I want to show you to make sure you place your stitches in the right place because the chain does look a little fiddly. So let's work this round together. So 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, increase, 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet. Here's that single crochet in the back side of the chain. It's an increase. And we're going to continue around, same pattern. 1, 1, increase, 1, 1, increase, and last repetition, 1, 1, increase. Right, so next up, for our next round, or for our next 9 rounds, all we need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. We're going to continue spiraling, spiraling until we've reached the full length that we want our body to be. So I will see you whenever I wrap up my 9th round of just regular crochet stitches. Alright, so last we talked, I have done quite a bit of work, and you can see I've got 9 rounds of just regular single crochet. So we can see our little guy's like feet here at the front. So before we stuff, we have one more round that we need to do, and we need to decrease before we add on the back legs. So we're gonna do 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches. So here's my first, and my second. And then we're going to decrease by single crocheting 2 stitches together. So we're going to go through the next, pull up a loop, go through the one after that, pull up a loop, and then draw through all the loops together. We're going to repeat that sequence of 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet decrease all the way around. Alright, so I've just wrapped up that decrease round and we're ready to stuff. So I'm going to pull my hook out by pulling that last stitch up long. And the reason we're waiting till now to stuff is that I've made several of these laying down body shapes, and I find that if you stuff the legs and then stuff the body, the legs like look weird. They don't they don't conform to the body's shape. So trust me on this one, it's tried and true. I like to stuff here. Now, of course, it's up to you. You can stuff earlier if you'd like. The way I like to go about it is I take just a little bit of fluff and go all the way down and stuff one of the legs. And you can use the end of your crochet hook to really push the fluff in. I find my hook gets caught in the fluff. So I actually like to take my tapestry needle, and once I've pushed some of the fluff down that direction, I kind of pull it into the leg by going through some of the stitches and then just pulling it all the way to the end. I'll repeat that on the other side. Once you've got those stuffed, we're going to go ahead and stuff the main part of the body as well. Also be really careful you don't accidentally stuff your working yarn in like I've done. How fortunate it is that I get to show you the dangers. Alright, let's try that again. Alright, so let's stuff the main part of the body now. And then when I stuff, I also kind of like to pull the body open a little bit. So I sort of pull the fluff kind of over to the sides of the body. And then when I've done that, I'll add a little bit more in the space where I've pulled the fluff apart. Alright, once we've got all that stuffed, we are ready to make the back legs. So first, let me redo that last decrease that I accidentally pulled out whenever I stuffed the working yarn inside. Then, before we begin separating out the back of the body, I like to make sure the last stitch I've worked is sort of centered in between where the front legs are. So I'm going to take my marker out, and I need to work, it looks like approximately 2 single crochet stitches. Depending on your tension, you may need to work more, or you may already be centered, or you may need to work less. Maybe you only need to work 1. So I'm going to work just 2 regular single crochet stitches so that my active stitch is centered in the center of the body. Then when I've done that, I'm going to pull my hook, my last loop long, and I need to do a little counting. So I'm going to take my marker, and we have 18 stitches, which is very fortunate because it's divisible by 2. And we need 2 legs. So we're going to have 9 stitches on one side and then 9 stitches on the other. So I'm going to count out my other side stitches here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm going to put my stitch marker there. So I know not to work in that stitch across the way, but the one on the other side of it. Alright, so to form our first leg, I'm going to go ahead and re-tighten down that last stitch that I've made. We're going to start crocheting the sides of the body together and around for this first leg. So to start, I like to kind of turn my piece. So my hook's on the opposite side. And we're going to be going in through the stitch directly to the left of our marker. So I like to take my first stitch, and we need to work kind of tightly for this one here, but I like to stretch that first stitch over and then going from front to back with the surface of the work facing me. So we're not going through this way, but we're going to go through this direction. I'm going to go through and make a regular single crochet stitch just like I would if I were working normally. So if you look, you can see it looks like it's a little bit loose, and that's okay. It'll tighten up as we work around, and then we need to do a little sewing whenever we finish both the legs anyway. So if yours has this like tail, like this long working yarn kind of inside, that's totally fine. No worries, mine does the same thing too. We do want to mark this stitch, however, because it is the first stitch of her round. So once you get that marked, we're going to continue working around in the next 8 stitches. So here's my second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, and 9. So you can see the leg is already starting to form. And we've done our first round. We need to make 3 more regular rounds of just single crochet. I'm going to work these with you because I find that it tends to be just a little fiddly. So if you need a little extra support, we can work them together. So here's my second round. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you can see that second round really helps pull that first round's stitch tight. Here's round 3. And the last round on this leg. Alright, so once we've got all 4 rounds on our first leg, we're going to go ahead, pull that last stitch long, just like we did when we stuffed before. I'm going to take my marker out as well. And we're going to add some stuffing to the inside of the leg. So kind of just push the stuffing in. And then I also kind of like to hook my finger and make sure that the stuffing from the body and the stuffing from the leg sort of meet, so there's no gap here. But once you've done that, we're ready to go ahead and close off the leg, and we're going to do that by single crocheting 1 stitch. So here's my first, 1 single crochet, and then we're going to decrease. And we're going to do that another 2 times. So single crochet, decrease, and the last one, single crochet, decrease. Then we'll slip stitch to the first single crochet that we made, and then cut ourselves a medium length tail, maybe 6 inches or so, pull through, and tighten that slip knot down into a knot. Then we're also going to take a little more fluff, maybe a pinch, not very much, and just stuff that last round that we made. You can kind of push. Alright, and that wraps up the first leg, so let's do the same thing here on the other side, and the process is just a little bit different, so let me help you get started, and then we're going to work it the same way once we do that first round. It'll be 4 rounds of single crochet, and then 1 round of 1 single crochet decrease. But let's get started with this first round because it's a little weird. I take my marker out, and I like to start kind of over here in this area, give myself a little bit of a running start before I have to cross over where the legs come together. So I'm going to go ahead and take my yarn and I'm going to reattach. So I'm going to take my hook, go through, I just pick a stitch here on the side. It really doesn't matter where you attach on. I go from front to back through just like I would if I were making a regular single crochet stitch. Then I'm going to take my yarn, and I like to leave a little bit of a tail. And I like to wrap the yarn around and pull it through, and then begin working normally. So now that I've attached on, I'm going to go ahead and weave my tail in as I go. So I'm going to place that first single crochet stitch in the next stitch over. And then mark that because it's the first stitch of my round. And I'm going to continue single crocheting in the next few stitches. So here's my second, my third, and then my last stitch on this side. Now again, this looks suspiciously like a stitch that I need to work in, but if you look, one of the stitches from our other leg is in this stitch. So we're not going to be working in that one. I've also worked my tail in long enough now that I can just stuff the rest of it inside of the body. And just like before, we're going to kind of stretch around, kind of over that leg that we've already made, and go into the first single crochet stitch on this side. Again, this looks suspiciously like the stitch, but you can see there's one going in from the other leg already. So I'm going to go ahead and go through here, make that single crochet, and then continue single crocheting. And here's my second to last. And if you look, where we attached on isn't actually a stitch. It's kind of a loop that we pulled over to form our first single crochet. So we need to go through and single crochet in that stitch as well. I also like to double check that I have the correct amount of stitches in this one. The second leg's always a little more fiddly than the first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got it. So we're going to continue working around for another 3 rounds, and then I will catch you whenever I get to the top of the foot, and we'll close it off together. Alright, so you can see I have worked my first 4 rounds of single crochet on the other side, on the other leg. Let's close it off the same way we did the other leg by making 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, and then decreasing. And then repeating that another 2 times. So 1 single crochet, decrease, 1 last time, 1 single crochet, decrease. And then just like the last foot, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch to that first single crochet stitch we made. And cut ourselves a medium tail, about 6 inches or so. Tighten down that last slip knot. And then take a little pinch of stuffing, and just like with the other leg, add just a little bit here towards the top. Alright, now that we've got both legs finished, let's go ahead and close up the tips of both of the legs. And then we're also going to get rid of the space between the legs as well. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my tapestry needle with one of the tails from one of the legs. And then we're going to sew through the front loop only of every stitch left, so should be 6 stitches. Okay, there's all 6. Then pull to cinch it closed. And then we're going to tie a surface knot, just loop our yarn over the surface of our work. So through some of the fabric and up through that loop. And pull tight. And then I'm going to use this tail to sew the space between the legs closed. So to do that, I'm going to send it straight down close to where the knot is and into the leg, and then up through one of the stitches close to where that gap is between the 2 legs. Now that I've done that, I'm going to run some straight stitches between, so I'm going to just run the yarn straight between the legs and grab some of the fabric on this side, and then sew through the next stitch, and then just pull to tighten those stitches together. So I usually do about 2, maybe 3 straight stitches between the legs to make sure that it's really closed. So you can see that gap's closed now. And then I'll tie another surface knot by, again, looping the thread over the surface of my work, sewing into a little of the fabric, and then up through that loop, pulling that knot tight, and then weaving that tail into the body out through a random spot, and trimming any excess. Alright, so with the other leg, we're going to close it up just like we did with the first leg. We just don't need to worry about sewing this gap closed, so you can just weave that tail in whenever you're done. Alright, so I wove in the tail on that last leg, and you can see the smaller of the two are the front legs, and the larger of the two are the back legs. We have the body complete, so let's go ahead and finish customizing it so that it looks more like an axolotl. Next up, let's go ahead and make the head. So again, starting with another magic loop. And we're going to put 6 single crochet stitches, not 8, but 6, inside of this magic loop. Alright, when you get all 6 of your single crochet stitches, go ahead and pull the tail tight. And for our second round, we're going to increase in each stitch. So 2 single crochet stitches in every 1 stitch from the round before. There's my first increase. Alright, so for round 3, we're going to continue increasing by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. So here's my first one. And then increasing in the next stitch. And then we'll repeat that sequence another 5 times for 6 times total. Alright, we're ready for round 4. And we'll start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first 2 stitches of the round, and then we'll put an increase in the stitch after that, and then repeat that sequence another 5 times for 6 times total. Alright, so for the next 5 rounds, all we need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will catch you back here whenever I finish up that 5th round of just single crochet. Alright, so I finished my 5th round of just regular single crochet here on our axolotl's head, and I'm ready to start decreasing. So we're going to decrease in the same pattern that we increased. So we'll start by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches. So here's my first single crochet, and my second. And then we'll decrease, single crocheting 2 stitches together, and then repeat that sequence another 5 times all the way around. Alright, next up we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, and then decrease by single crocheting 2 stitches together. And then just like before, we're going to repeat that sequence another 5 times for 6 total, all the way around. Alright, so now that we are here, we actually need to pause on making the head. I like to have the frills and the face and everything completed before I stuff and finish up the last round of decreases. So we're going to pull this last stitch long, and then we're going to do something unheard of in crochet. We're going to set this unfinished piece aside so that we can make the frills. I promise you it won't come undone. We'll come right back to it. Just set it aside. And then we're going to use our contrasting color to make our frill. So I like to use a darker color like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So I'm using this darker pink to make my frill. And the way that we're going to make our frill is we need to first tie a slip knot in a very particular way. So I like to tie mine so that whenever I pull on the tail itself, the tail tightens it, but not when I pull on the working yarn. So the way I form my slip knots is I leave a very long tail. And we're going to do this because we need to use this for sewing later. So reserve yourself maybe 5 or 6 inches worth of tail. And then we're going to fold that tail behind the working yarn. I actually like to put my fingers inside of that loop that I've formed. Then we're going to kind of fold the tail around that working yarn, and I like to pull it between my fingers. So you can see it's kind of folded. And then we're going to pull that loop through to form that slip knot. So as you can see, it pulls by tugging on the tail, but not when you tug on the working yarn itself. It won't tighten when you tug on that. So let's tie that again together, because I know that's maybe an unusual way to tie a slip knot. So again, reserve yourself 5 or 6 inches of tail, and then we're going to fold it behind our working yarn. I like to put my fingers inside of that loop. Once we've got it behind our working yarn, we're going to kind of fold it on itself. You can see it's sort of pinching the working yarn. And then we're going to pull it through as a loop, and then I like to hold the working yarn in the tail and pull the loop through to tie my slip knot. Once you've got it tied, we're going to go ahead and take our hook. We'll go through and tighten by, let me put it in the correct way, tighten by pulling that tail so that it is tightened down on our hook. Then we're going to start by chaining 4 stitches. And then in the second chain from our hook, so remember we don't count the one on our hook, but in the second chain we're going to slip stitch pretty tightly too. And we'll keep slip stitching in the remaining 2 chains that we've made. Then we're going to chain 4 more stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And just like before, in the second chain from our hook, we're going to slip stitch pretty tightly. And then slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. So the remaining 2 stitches of our chain. And then to finish off our frill, we're going to chain 3 this time, not 4. So 1, 2, 3. And just like before, in the second chain from our hook, we're going to tightly slip stitch. In that last chain, we'll slip stitch. And then to close off the frill, we need to make 1 more slip stitch, but we're going to make it in some of the stitches from the last 2 frills. So we're going to go through the last slip stitch that we made on the second frill, and then we're going to go through both stitches, both the slip knot and that last slip stitch that we made on the first frill. So just slip right underneath both of those loops. Then to pull this last slip stitch closed, I like to hold the frills, kind of pinch them all together here with my left hand, and then pull all the way through all of those loops to finish off my frill. Then to close off the frill and get it ready for sewing, we're going to cut ourselves the same length of tail that we have on our slip knot. So I'm going to cut my working yarn so it's about the same length as my slip knot's tail. And then pull both of those tails through that last loop. And then just keep pulling, 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 pulling until they both go through. And then tighten them separately. So there's my slip knot tightened. There's my last slip stitch tightened. And that wraps up our first axolotl frill. We need to make one more of these in the exact same way, and then we can start working on getting them attached to the axolotl's head. Alright, so I have both of my axolotl frills complete, so I'm ready to go ahead and put some details on my axolotl's head. So let's grab that piece that we set aside earlier and start by placing the eyes on the axolotl's face. So let me grab some safety eyes. Alright, so I've got my safety eyes picked out, and I'm using these 8mm kind of cute safety eyes. I've got more info about them in the description of this video, so check it out if you want to use the same eyes that I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and take my first eye, and starting at the head's magic loop, I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in between the 7th and 8th round, I'm going to place that first eye. And when I have that first eye placed, I'm going to go ahead and put the second eye in between those same 2 rounds, but 1, 2, 3, about 4 stitches apart. I like my eyes to be closer together so I can sew a small mouth in between the 2 of them. But you can, of course, play around with where you want your safety eyes to be placed. However, once you've got them placed and you're happy with them, go ahead and take the little backs that come with them and snap them on. Then when you've got the safety eye back snapped on, we're going to go ahead and add the mouth next. Alright, so to add the mouth, we're going to go ahead and take a little length of black embroidery floss and get that threaded through an embroidery needle. And then once that's threaded, we need a knot at the other end. So the way I like to tie those is the way that my grandma showed me when I was little, is I take the end of the embroidery floss and I kind of pinch it against the needle. And then I wrap clockwise 8 or so times. And then holding tightly to that so they don't come unwound, I'm going to slide all of those wraps down over the eye of my needle. And I just keep sliding. Then you can pull to tighten that into a knot. I also like to trim any excess tail off of the back end of my knot, just so I don't get tangled up while I'm working. Alright, so once you've got that, we can go ahead and grab our axolotl's head. And it's up to you what kind of smile you want to sew. I also think it looks cute without one too, so it's kind of, whatever is kind of your favorite thing to do here. But I'm going to sew a W-shaped mouth. And the way I like to do that is I make 2 V's that sort of join together. So I'm going to sew up through the middle of that 7th round. So it's the round just above where the eyes go, and then centered in between the eyes. So there's that first stitch, and then I'm going to go and then sew into the bottom of round 8. So this stitch, the round underneath where the eyes went in. So I'm going to just bring that down out to the axolotl's head. Then I'll sew the other side of that V, again coming up through kind of the middle of round 7. And then back down through that same stitch in round 8 and out to the axolotl's head. And then let's make the other side by going up through the same stitch we came up through the first time. So halfway through round 7 or so. Careful not to snag any of your active working yarn with this. Then we're going to repeat by sewing another stitch down kind of in the bottom of round 8 and then out to the axolotl's head. And then we'll make the last part by sewing up through Here we are. Again, be careful not to grab any of the stuff that we're still using to crochet. And then let's sew the last part by going down through that same stitch. So you can see there's his mouth. And to secure, I'm going to kind of flip his head inside out just a little bit. And then we're going to tie a surface knot, just like we did when we finished off the legs. So loop our embroidery floss over, grab just a little of the fabric of our work, and then up through that loop we just made, and then pull to tighten. And then we don't need to weave this in, because it's inside the head, and it counts as free stuffing. So go ahead and just kind of toss the rest of the embroidery floss you didn't use inside of your axolotl's head. Alright, next up, let's go ahead and stuff the head. A quick note, whenever I stuff the head, I always try to make sure that the eyes have their stems pointed or poked so that they're looking kind of off center. So kind of just hook your finger inside and make sure that those stems are seated correctly inside the fluff. And then I find that the head looks pretty cute if you sort of stretch in the opposite direction of the eyes. So kind of just give it a pull. And then of course put a little more fluff in the center where you pull the stuffing apart. Alright, that's the head stuffed. And then last, let's get the frills attached. So the reason we left the tails on our frills and we cut them the same length is because we're going to use them to tie this frill to the inside of our axolotl's head. So go ahead and thread one of the tails left over from the frill, doesn't matter which. And then we're going to go through the axolotl's head. I like to count over 1 to 3 stitches from its eye, but you can also make it directly centered on the side of the head if you want. So 3 stitches over, and we're going to sew down and just out through the fluff at the bottom of the axolotl's head. You can unthread your tapestry needle once that's sewn through, and then double check that your frill is facing the right direction before you sew your next stitch. So the wrong way kind of looks like this. You can see all these bumps from our chain and our slip stitches. The right way is a little neater looking. It's got kind of like those nice lines from the stitches. So once that's facing the right way, we're going to go ahead and take that second part, that second tail, thread that through our tapestry needle, and then we're going to sew through pretty much the same place that our first tail went through, kind of like that third stitch from the eye, and then up through the fluff, the bottom of the axolotl's head. You can unthread your tapestry needle, and then we're going to take these 2 tails and we're going to tie a square knot just like you do whenever you tie your shoe. And pull that first one pretty tightly to really secure the frills. It kind of sucks the frill into the head a little bit, which is kind of what we want. And then repeat, making a double knot. Once you've done that, you can give those tails a snip. And that attaches the frill to the axolotl's head and attaches it really securely. Let's repeat that on the other side. Alright, I've got both frills attached to my axolotl's head and he looks really cute. So let's go ahead and finish up the crochet portion of the head. So all we need to do is decrease in every stitch all the way around. And we also need to add maybe just a little more fluff as well. So let's do the decreasing first. Alright, so I've decreased all the way around. Let's go ahead and slip stitch to the first decrease that we made. And then we're going to cut ourselves a long tail, so maybe 10 inches or so. And pull that last slip stitch through. I actually don't think I need to add any more fluff to my axolotl's head. I kind of like them to be a little flat. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this attached to the axolotl's body. So go ahead and thread that tail that we just cut through a tapestry needle. And then grab the body that we've already made. And the way I like to sew them on is I like them to be positioned really close to the front legs and then sort of looking out at you, so like kind of head to the side. You can of course sew the head on straight if you want. It's really up to you how you want to position it. And then make sure it's not too far shifted to the center of the body because it makes it look kind of like a horrifying abomination. So scoot sort of like closer to those front legs when we attach. And then we're not going to be sewing through that last round that we made. We're actually going to be sewing through sort of that first round of decreases that we did. So the 2 single crochet decrease round. So I like to pull the tail so it's at the front where I'm attaching the head on. And I'm going to grab just one of those stitches from that round there. And then grab a little of the fabric of the body, kind of underneath where that is. And I sort of just zigzag my way around, grabbing a stitch from the head, a stitch from the body. Until I'm all the way around the axolotl's head. I also sometimes will move the front paws out of my way, kind of hold them so that I can get to those stitches a little easier. So I'm just going to keep zigzagging, grabbing stitches from that round, sewing them to the body until I get back to where I started. Alright, so I have sewn all the way around and my axolotl's head is attached. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a surface knot, again, just like before, loop my thread over the surface of my work. So down and into some of the fabric of the body and then up through that loop that we've tied. And then just pull and keep pulling until it ties a knot. And then we're going to weave this tail in by going down into the fabric of the body, out through a random place. And I'll weave that in a second time, just to be extra secure. Alright, once you've done that, you can unthread your tapestry needle, give that yarn a snip, and the head is attached. Last but not least, let's make the tail and get that attached to wrap up this axolotl. Alright, so to make the axolotl's tail, we're going to start off with the main body color. We're going to actually be using both colors for the tail. But we're going to start with that light pink or whatever color that you're using for the main body. And again, make another magic loop. Alright, once you've got that formed, we're going to place 6 single crochet stitches inside of our magic loop. Alright, once you've got those first 6, you can pull your magic loop tail to close off that first round. And then we're going to just continue putting 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. We're kind of making a little bit of a tube. Alright, so 6 rounds of single crochet. I will see you whenever I am closer to the end. Alright, so I just finished my 6th round of single crochet. So you can see I've got a little tube. We go ahead and finish off by slip stitching to the first single crochet of that last round that you made. And then we're going to cut a long tail to sew with, so 10 inches or so. And then pull that last slip stitch all the way through, and then tighten. I'm also going to trim my magic loop tail here. Right, and then we're going to add the detail, like the little frills on his tail, by switching to our secondary color. So for me, it's that dark pink. And then we're going to attach, first we'll take our tube and we're going to kind of pinch it so it's flat. And we're going to be working through the crochet on this side and around the top, and then through the crochet on that side to add the frill. So we're going to take our hook and go through the fabric of our work really close to the bottom. So I'm going through both layers, so both sides of that tube when it's flattened. And we're going to attach on, just like we did with that second leg. So I'm going to wrap my new yarn around my hook and then pull a loop through. And then once we've got that, we're going to chain 1 and add another single crochet stitch to that same place that we attached on. Then we're going to chain 1 stitch and then slip stitch in the next place that we attach through. So when you're working here on the side, it's not precise exactly, but I tend to attach in the spaces between the rounds. So I'm going to go through here and push my hook through both layers of fabric and then slip stitch. Then for my next stitch, I'm going to go through, again, the space between those rounds tend to be where I end up. So we're going to go through that space and put 2 single crochet stitches. I'm also working my tail end in here too. So 2 single crochet stitches in that space between those rounds. And we're going to chain another stitch, then slip stitch in the space between the next 2 rounds. We're going to continue that pattern of 2 single crochet stitches in the same space, chain 1, single crochet, 1 last time, and then to flip around the top of our tail, I'm going to go through that last space, so it's the one between our magic loop and that first round that we made, and I'm going to put 5 single crochet stitches in the same space. So here's my second, my third, my fourth, and 1 more. Then we're going to chain 1, and that's going to help us flip around to the other side. So in the space between the magic loop and our first round of single crochet, we're going to put 2 single crochet stitches. So 1 and 2. So you can see that sort of helps us flip around to the other side of the axolotl's tail. Now that we've got 2 single crochet in the space between on the other side, we're going to work our way down with that same pattern. So we'll chain 1, slip stitch in the next space, 2 single crochet in the space after, chain 1, slip stitch, 2 single crochet, chain 1, slip stitch, and then here I'm going to put 2 single crochet stitches and then slip stitch in that same stitch to fasten off. As you can see, that adds that frill on the outside of the tail, and we're going to cut ourselves a medium length tail of this darker color, so 6 inches or so. Then pull that last slip stitch through. Then we need to weave this in, and then if you didn't weave the tail in from when you fastened on, we're going to need to weave that one in too. So let's weave in this darker pink tail first. So thread your tapestry needle with it, and then we're just going to send it straight inside the tail, so it's out of our way. You can give any excess a snip. I'll go ahead and trim my tail from fasten on as well. I weaved mine in. And then to add a little shape to our tail, I'm going to thread the lighter color through the eye of my tapestry needle. And then we're going to pinch the tail together here at the bottom. So like bring those 2 pink sides together, and then we're going to just sew some straight stitches through all of this fabric here to add that shape to the tail. And that, I think, adds just a really cute little shape here towards the bottom of the tail. Alright, so last thing to do is to get it attached to the axolotl. So go ahead and grab your axolotl's body. And I like to sew the tail so it is right where the legs meet the body here in the back. And that the front side, so the side that has that pinch, and then the right side of all of the single crochet stitches that we made, so that it's facing the same direction as our axolotl's face. So once you've got it positioned, all we'll need to do is run a couple of straight stitches in the fabric of our axolotl's body, and then run another stitch inside of its tail. I'm going to run another stitch here for the tail just to make sure it's really secure. And then one more into the tail end of the body. Right, once it's attached securely, I'm going to go ahead and tie a surface knot here into the body of the axolotl. And then weave that tail inside of the axolotl's body. And of course, cut any excess. And that wraps up this axolotl tutorial. So thanks for tuning in, I hope you enjoyed. And of course, I would be absolutely delighted if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. Subscribing tells me that you like what I do and you want to see more. So as always, thank you for watching.